to Attenuation, a weekly podcast where two friends come together to drink beer, discuss beer styles and trends, and just generally ruminate on the meaning of life, aka beer. If you enjoy your time with us, we invite you to become a weekly listener and subscribe to the podcast. Without further ado, here is this week's episode.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Attenuation, a beer podcast. My name is Jason and I'm joined with my best friend, Steven, from 8th grade.
Hello.
It's your trademark entrance now, you know that, right?
Yeah.
And this week's episode, we are going to focus in on a style of beer, give you a little bit of history about the beer, and then talk about some modern interpretations we've been drinking. So for pronunciation purposes, I'm going to turn this over to my co-host, Steven, to introduce the beer of the week. Because
You're going to make me sound like an idiot. Thanks,
No,
man.
You're going to sound good.
Well, okay, so I've been listening to the Google pronunciation of this word over and over and over again. But the American style, the American pronunciation would be Kolsch. But if you were German, you'd probably say something like Kolsch. Yeah, sorry, all you Germans listening.
It sounded professional.
Thanks.
I'm gonna stick with Kolsch.
Okay, you say Kolsch, I'll say Kolsch.
All right, perfect. Sounds good.
Let's see if we can annoy the crap out of our listeners.
So for our tasting, we actually both picked Kolsch's. So I am going to introduce mine, and then in lieu of actually giving you tasting notes, we thought we kind of spread it out over the history and discussing the style. But for reference, I'm drinking Almanac Beer Co.'s, and they're out of San Francisco, California. And this is the beer they make called True Kolsch. And this is 5% ABV. And it says on the can that it will be bright, refreshing, and crisp.
Nice. Now, they used to be all sour brewer.
Oh,
right?
Is that true? I think you're right.
And then they're like starting to make other styles because people want other styles.
You know what? I think you're right because I remember I've always liked Almanac for some of the sours they do, and I remember I think I saw that they made a hazy IPA, and I did like a double take, and I was like, "What?
Yeah,
they make an IPA?"
And it was good too. Have you had
it was good. I have had it. Yeah, and it is good.
Yeah.
So they're really branching out.
So that's cool.
Yeah, that's a good one. So did you also pick a Kolsch for tonight?
I did. So I feel like I got super authentic because we are very lucky in Fredricksburg, Texas, which is just outside of Austin. It's actually kind of our wine country. So there's tons of wineries out there. It's like Texas's Napa, basically. But in the little town of Fredricksburg, there's this Alstadt Brewing. It actually won, it was like number 4 on the top brewers in the world, the U.S. on the U.S. Open Beer Championship in 2019. So it was number 4. So like it's really, really cool brewer. But there you brew all German styles. That's it. Only German styles of beer.
Oh, perfect.
They try to be super authentic to the way those are made. So anyway, this is the Kolsch from Alstadt Brewing. So it should be very, very true to style. And this one says it should be exceptionally smooth, refreshing, and balanced.
Nice. And what's the ABV on yours?
Ooh, good question. 4.8.
Okay. So yeah, we're about the exact same.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm gonna
pop our cans.
Now, right away, I've learned something about Kolsch, and that it's supposed to be served in a special kind of glass, and it's eluding me what it's called. Do you happen to know?
Yeah, I'm going to throw some German at you again. Stunga glass.
Oh, okay, perfect. So it's supposed to be about 6 ounces, and it's very tall and thin. And from what I understand, this is for a couple of reasons. One, it's to preserve the carbonation in the beer, and 2, they want it to be the right temperature. So rather than serving you a large amount, a lot of times sometimes you see these massive beer steins they worry about, the temperature warming up over time. They'd rather serve you small amounts, kind of in rapid succession, so you're always tasting the beer in what they consider the ideal conditions. So I don't have one of those glasses, but I have my little beer tasting glass, so I don't know how many ounces it is, but it's tall and thin. So I will be trying to recreate the authentic experience here in my office today.
Nice. Yeah, I tried to pick like the most straight cylindrical glass that I have. It's not quite as like small as the Stunga glass, but tried to recreate the true way to drink this. But I'm sure it doesn't make that much of a difference.
It's tradition, Steve.
Just so that we're not like we don't go full beer snob, okay?
We're gonna drink it out of the correct glass. I'm importing one from Germany today. Speaking of tradition, where did this beer get started? Where did this beer come from? Teach me and the listeners about this style.
So, I mentioned last week I kind of went off on a little tangent about the different yeasts and the different way to ferment beers, and the difference between ales and lagers. And so it's really interesting. In 16th century Germany, in the state of Bavaria, they passed a law called the Reinheitsgebot, and it was a German purity law. It also kind of regulated how much you could charge for a beer, but also sort of hidden in all of the rules about how much you could charge was basically what ingredients you could use to make the beer. And the limitation was water, barley, hops. They didn't even mention yeast. Technically, they just sort of it was almost as if that was a given. Of course, there's yeast, but they also limited it to top fermenting yeast. So they only wanted ales brewed, and they only wanted you to use water, barley, and hops. Apparently, there's a lot of discussion about exactly the motive behind it, but mainly they said they just didn't want to compete with the bakers for wheat and rye. So they wanted to leave wheat and rye for the bakers to make their bread, and barley for beer. So,
oh, that's interesting.
And then there's other side reasons, religious reasons of making it super pure and not using weird witchcrafty ingredients, or ingredients they considered witchcrafty, whatever. So and it was just all about being very pure and only using barley. There's a lot of it's kind of funny because when I think of German styles, for me a lot of wheat styles come in my head, like Hefeweizen and goes, their wheat sours and stuff. But apparently those were all, some exceptions were made for those beers being brewed because they were isolated to very, very small geographical locations. That goes as a example of that. And then just geographically, those styles came from other areas of Germany, but at least around the Bavarian area, they followed the Reinheitsgebot. So
it's kind of interesting because even now, I feel like the craft beer history is obviously a lot shorter than German's beer history, but it's kind of what we talk about now, that if you want to get a certain style of beer, you have to live in a certain region of the U.S. to get access to it.
Yeah.
And part of that is because of, shipping and distribution and stuff like that. But it's kind of interesting that, we have we almost have different regions of beer in the U.S., but just based on where the brewers are.
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of, especially styles around Europe, it all had to do with water quality, or what kind of, or what water you were working with, the water that they initially brewed goses with, it just was a higher salinity, and that's why it was a salty beer. The only reason Guinness is like it was made in Ireland, like that's because that's the kind of beer they could make with the water, you know.
Okay.
That's why that style came out of that area. It wasn't like they just decided they liked that style. That was just the best beer to make with the water that they had. So anyway, getting back to the Kolsch, in the area of Cologne, Germany, bottom fermenting styles were becoming very popular. People really liked the Pilsners because they were very crisp and clean. And I don't know whether there was I think maybe you did some research on technology, like they were able to brew at a lower temperature.
Oh, yeah. So a couple things. I was kind of researching. I kind of got lost in a little bit of a rabbit hole. Just about Pilsner. So I don't know if it's specific to Kolsch, but they did say, like in the 1840s, they invented the indirect heat kiln. So they were able to better control toasting, basically. So you could get lighter application of heat when you're toasting the grain, basically.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
But nothing in terms of keeping the beer cold, at a colder temperature.
So yeah, actually, I don't know how they did that.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. But yeah, so anyway, these styles of bottom fermenting yeast with cold lagered for a long period of time, it just creates a very crisp, clean beer. The biggest reason for that is that you don't allow the yeast to create esterification of the alcohol. Esterification just means it's just a chemical reaction that happens to different alcohols. The main alcohol in beer being ethanol, but there's other alcohols, and they can all become esterified. And those esters have very distinct flavors. So in a lot of ales, the esters are giving off fruity flavors like pear. In Hefeweizen, that's why it tastes like banana. That's all esters.
Oh.
But if the beer has too many esters in it, then that's when it starts to almost taste like you get a gasoline kind of flavor.
That doesn't sound appealing.
No, it's not good. and that's how you can tell sometimes that you had too much esters, and that can happen by underpitching your yeast. So if you don't have enough yeast in the beer, so a lot of home brewers just try to pitch as much yeast as possible to make sure they're not under pitching. But anyway, there's a lot of science about home brewing and brewing beer in general. But the main idea is that if you do not have these esters in your beer, it's very, very crisp, clear. There's no overwhelming flavor coming in, which is kind of funny. I guess, macro styles are very popular, and that's the macro styles are Pilsners and these very, very crisp, clear beers, and people like them. They're refreshing. They're not complex, and they're very easy to drink. So I can see why they're popular.
Yeah, it makes sense. It appeals to the masses, and it's a lot of times in hobbies. I'm also into Scotch, so a little bit of a tangent. But early on, whenever someone asks me about Scotch or whiskey, a lot of times they say, "Oh, is it good? Is it really smooth?" Because that's a lot of people attribute smoothness, easiness to drink. That that's the mark of quality. Yeah. And sure, to a certain extent, that is the mark of quality. But I think what happens when you start to drink, it happens in craft beer too, I believe. You start on those, but then very quickly you start to get more interested in things being more complex and a little bit more challenging. Yeah. So because you're trying to understand what's happening, different flavor profiles, and arriving and exiting, across the palate. Not to get too beer snobby with you guys, but sometimes you don't want that, and that's kind of why I always make the analogy of if you just did yard work. I don't want to be challenged. I just want to come in the house and drink a Kolsch. Like, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
So it is funny that like even whenever this was early 17th century, here you have like almost like a progenitor of the macro beer style arising, and it's just as popular back then as it is now.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, it's almost flipped. Like, they were like fighting against this style. Like, all these people were saying like, we like this, and they're like, no, that's not how we make beer. That was my German.
Oh no.
This is not how we make beer.
You're gonna have to cut that.
So they were like fighting back against this, saying we're gonna make laws. So in Cologne, Germany, they made a law saying they had all the brewers, they had to like swear an oath that they would only top ferment their beer. And so they were like, yeah, we'll do that. And then they're like, okay, we're gonna top ferment the beer, and then we're gonna cold lager it and keep it crisp, and we're gonna call that Kolsch. So
wait, is this entire beer style about skirting rules?
Yes, exactly. These are the rebels, man.
This is punk rock, dude. I like
finding the loopholes, man.
So Kolsch is the loophole style.
Yeah. So it's kind of the hybrid, you know. They said, yeah, we'll top ferment, but we want to make a Pilsner-like style with top fermenting yeast. So it's kind of cool, and it kind of becomes a nice base for, and we'll talk about some of the modern styles that are being made in this style. You can kind of take this almost as like a lager base and do some other fun stuff with it, but incorporate maybe some of those ale flavors, those ester flavors, and not making it as crisp. You can kind of hybridize the style.
Yeah, that's really cool. So then another thing I actually came across in my research is Kolsch is a little bit like champagne. You can't actually call a beer Kolsch unless it's brewed in Cologne, right?
Yeah. They have it like geographically protected. I think with like the UN even, it's like a version of a copyright basically. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's enforced. It's not enforced in the United States, actually.
Right. I was gonna say because my almanac says it's called True Kolsch. So maybe the True is modifying. But
you will see if you're in a tap room and you see something and something says Kolsch style ale, that's because technically that's what they should be putting. So just like you would see sparkling wine instead of champagne, which is what you should be marking your sparkling wine that you should be if it's not brewed in Champagne, France. That's how you should label your Kolsch. It should be Kolsch style ale.
So the funny thing, you just said that, and now I'm inspecting this can, and while it does say True Kolsch in huge font across the top, at the bottom it says German Kolsch style ale.
Dude, they're still finding loopholes. They're doing loopholes now.
This is a loophole name of the loophole style. It's a meta loophole.
Oh, that's so great.
But like they looks like they did follow the rules. They said it's a German Kolsch style ale. So good job, Almanac. We won't send our lawyers against you.
Yeah, and Alstadt. I was gonna say I don't think it really says. It doesn't say Kolsch style or anything like that because they're really, really hell-bent on making it exactly to tradition. So they actually have a whole write-up on the side of the can about the style and how they originated from Cologne and how the beer is supposed to be brewed and how it's supposed to taste. And then it even has a whole thing about the Reinheitsgebot purity laws. So they're very much
traditional.
They're committed to brewing these beers in the traditional style, which is very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. They're kind of
saying like, hey, this is basically a real Kolsch, just to be brewed in Fredricksburg, Texas.
That's pretty awesome.
As close as you're gonna get outside of Germany.
Yeah, that's cool. So, speaking of how a Kolsch tastes, are you ready to give our tasting notes? So, like generally, what is a Kolsch supposed to be like? So, I understand it's supposed to be crisp. I know they're supposed to be like, and even on the nose of this one, I get a lot of malt, and then a little bit of like that yeast ester. I don't know if that's correct. And almost no hops. I don't really get any hops at all. Maybe the slightest amount. Yeah. What are you getting on your nose?
So I was going to mention, first the carbonation. So it is very highly carbonated. and it's super clear. I mean, this thing is like, you put your hand on it, you can almost probably read something through this. It's so clear. And then in terms of like smell, definitely getting a little bit of esters, like just that, like almost like a Hefeweizen, but like almost like a super subdued Hefeweizen. So the esters are very low, but they're there, which is interesting. So it's almost like you assume some esterification with the Kolsch style that you wouldn't want with Pilsner, because you are fermenting it like an ale.
Right. So it's not cold fermentation. The cold process is after, right?
Yeah.
So you're still getting the ale fermentation style.
It's just very subdued. But yeah, and then drinking it, I get a little bit of pear, a lot of honey. Yeah, no hops whatsoever. Like, I get no hop bitterness. It's really just a little bit of that yeasty esterification, and then just the touch of honey and pear.
Yeah, I would say for mine, very similar. Like, there's definitely a initial sweetness in the beginning, and then the slightest, and then definitely those esters come in, and then a little bitterness on the finish, I would say. But overall, it's insanely crisp. Like, It feels like I'm taking a bite out of an apple. It doesn't taste like apple, but I don't know. It's just like, that's how crisp it is. And then now that you mentioned the clarity, it's the transparent. Yeah, the transparency on this beer is insane. Like, it's actually kind of cool. And then the carbonation, there's bubbles.
I'm surprised by your sweetness in yours. Mine's super dry.
You know what? It's
highly attenuated.
Oh, it's highly attenuated. It is dry. You're right. It is dry. So let me reassess. I'm very impressionable though, so you're gonna affect my tasting notes. I'm just warning you.
I mean, this is like as dry as champagne as I've ever had. Like, it's just so dry.
It is very dry. And so I'm getting the dryness on the entrance, but maybe it's in the aftertaste. I do get a little touch of kind of what you mentioned, like honey, maybe.
Well, and we're drinking different beers, so.
That's true. I will say, as far as giving this a thumbs up or thumbs down, I really like this.
Yeah. No, I mean...
And this is coming from the stout guy, so...
Just a little side note, for comic relief. My wife asked tonight, is Jason going to drink another stout?
That's what I like, man.
She's like, I'm going to stop listening to your podcast if he does stouts every week.
Oh, geez. I'm going to have to mix it up.
So, anyway...
All right, I won't drink another stout. No, well, I'm not drinking a stout.
She didn't say she was going to stop listening to the podcast. I just made that up. But
okay.
She did say you should mix it up every once in a while.
Okay, I'll try to branch out. But, and case in point, I always like to say, every situation has the right beer to drink. You don't have to drink a stout, and you don't have to drink a beer that's complex. This is very refreshing.
Yeah.
It lives up to the can when it says... bright, refreshing, and crisp.
Hey, St. Arnold Brewing in Houston, we've mentioned them before. They have a Kolsch, and you know what it's called? Lawnmower.
Oh, did we try that together?
I think we have drink. Yeah, I think we did drink that together. But,
I think that was really good.
But yeah, so it's their Kolsch, and it's a perfect lawnmower beer. So they need a lawnmower.
Yeah, that's a perfect tie-in. It's like, drink it after you do yard work.
And I think we did an episode on gateway beers. This is kind of a good gateway beer, for someone who drinks Coors Light or one of the macro pilsners, and says, hey, let me try something new or try something that's considered craft beer. This is a great style because it's going to give you a lot of what those macros give you, but it's also going to push you a little bit towards the ales, so in some of the flavors. So
yeah, I could definitely see that. This is a great recommendation. We'll have to do Gateway Beers episode 2.
So thank you to those rule breakers or those rule benders. We should
all because they they wanted to find a loophole. So now, are there some modern versions of this that?
Well, so throughout the week, because we knew we were going to do this deep dive into Kolsch, I threw myself wholeheartedly into the research, which was really just drinking as many Kolsch's as I could find. So you're
nice. Welcome. It sounds like hard work.
Very, very rigorous research. Okay. So I wanted to talk about two of them that I drank, which were very, very interesting. So the first one, it's from Rar and Sons, which is a Texas brewer. They have this. I can't remember I should have written it down. I'm horrible. But anyway, it's a mango chili Kolsch. Now, from the name of the beer, that is not assumed. Like it didn't say that in the title of the beer name. And I was just at a restaurant, and I was, like, oh, a Kolsch. Let me get that, because I'm researching Kolsch's this week. So anyway, I drank it, and I was like, man, there's like this burn in my throat.
Oh.
Like, what is this? And so I was like, I need to look this up. What is in this beer? Because I don't know why I'm tasting this burn. And then I realized, oh, it's a mango chili Kolsch.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of a little segue from our episode last week when we talked about some of the trends with brewing with chilies in our beer and having some of that spice. So this was, in fact, a Kolsch that they had brewed with mangoes and chilies. It was good. I think it's a good sort of example of how you could take the Kolsch backbone and just do some fun stuff with it. And
how do mangoes and chilies adhere to the German purity laws?
Yeah, mango chilies and oatmeal pies are all good.
Are you going to come out with an oatmeal pie Kolsch?
Yeah, maybe.
Be sure to add a lot of lactose and marshmallow.
And serve it with marshmallows in it.
Yes, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, the Germans are going to be so happy with me. All those Reinheitsgebot riders are going to crawl out of their grave.
They're going to get you.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was it was just a cool example of the style, using the style to make a beer. And really, I mean, if you want to just say, hey, I made a Kolsch to control the esters, right? Like I wanted minimal ester flavors, so I made it like a Kolsch and added these other things or whatever, made the beer. So they just brewed a beer and basically controlled the amount of esters in the beer. And then we were in the Dallas area this last weekend, and before we left, we wanted to stop at a brewery, and we kind of like tried to find one that had food as well. And so we found this one called Cowtown Brewing. We had never heard of it. I had never heard of it, but they had barbecue and their beer, and so I was like, oh, let's try this place. I just wanted, first of all, say like just a shout out to them because they were awesome. Like service was great, the food was good, and the beers were great. I mean, I ordered a Kolsch. It was in the Stunga glass. Like they served it exactly how it was supposed to be served.
Authentic, nice.
Yeah, it was super true to style. I thought. I thought that it was actually pretty estery. I will say. Like
okay.
My tasting notes on it were, this is a Hefeweizen, but not, like it was like a subdued Hefeweizen. Like that was if I had to simplify it into a few words, that would be how I would taste it. So like banana and cloves, but super, super subdued and super crisp. And so I think they did a great job with this style. I also drank a sour there that they just absolutely nailed. Yeah, they just did a great job. So anyway, a little shout out to they're up in Fort Worth, Texas. If you're ever there, check out Cowtown Brewery because they did a great job.
Nice, that's awesome. So what I'm hearing is that the Kolsch style is alive and well.
Yeah,
in the year 2021.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's like when you buy a car or you're looking at buying a certain type of car, and all of a sudden you see that type of car everywhere.
Yes.
As throughout the week, as I kind of looked for Kolsch, I started to find them everywhere, which is cool.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So I unfortunately didn't get to try any other Kolsch's other than this true Kolsch from Almanac, but Like you said, I think I'll keep my eyes open. I know like if you go to, well, I don't know what your equivalent is, but Total Wine here in California, if you go to the import section, they have a bunch of, beers they imported from Germany. And I know there's a couple styles of either Kolsch style ales or pretty famous ones or actual Kolsches. So maybe I'll have to pick an assortment of those and do a side-by-side tasting someday. But overall, I will say I'm a fan of the style, and I feel like I understand it a little bit better now today.
Yeah, totally. This was fun, actually.
Yeah, and I especially liked, diving into the style and also drinking the style at the same time. So we'll have to do this again where we pick another style and then we both get a beer of that style and we kind of give a little history, give some tasting notes, and talk about modern interpretations of it.
Yeah, this might be one of my favorite things we've done. And I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but I just love side-by-side tastings, getting flights, just like being able to taste things side-by-side is the only way you can really differentiate or start to differentiate flavors and really develop your palate. So just walking into one style and trying a bunch of beers of that style was just so cool. So anyone out there listening, especially trying to get into craft beer, just do this. Do that. Pick something and just try a bunch of them. And honestly, you're going to probably start liking them. I mean, that's how it was for me. Once I start trying stuff, and especially trying new things, and it's just so easy to develop your palate when you just dive in. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then finally, so in lieu of beer news, because I couldn't find any interesting beer news this week, after scouring the internet.
It's a slow beer news week?
It's a slow beer news week. Craft beer news is not, it's not the hottest commodity. So
there's not a lot of national beer news, right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's probably local beer news, but nothing that appeals to the masses. But
yeah, so no news, except we have personal news. Steven and I in May will be traveling to Seattle on a beer journey.
We get to see each other in person.
Yes.
Live, which I'm so excited about.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
And we're going to visit some awesome breweries.
Yeah, I think we're going to try to hit up Reuben's, Fremont, Bale-Breaker, and maybe Stoop. Yeah,
Stoop. There's Urban Family there, I think, which is, they make a lot of good sours. So we have a lot of options and a lot of good places to do some hiking too, probably.
Yes, our two favorite.
If we want to break from the beer.
So our tradition we have a history and a tradition of going on beer tasting, brewery visits combined with hikes because we like hiking as well. And we did this one year. Do you remember?
I remember. Okay. First off, can I just give a little background so that
Yeah. You lead us into the story before I embarrass you.
Okay. First of all, my fellow podcaster here, he had mentioned earlier he likes scotch, okay? This guy drinks he was used to drinking high alcohol drinks and beers. He liked his barrel-aged stouts, okay? Me, I was more of a 4% Goza guy, okay? Going into our first year at the Great American Beer Festival, at elevation, I should say, Denver, it's really high up there, thin air, okay? We were drinking a lot at the beer festival, and I just wasn't really used to it, okay? Okay, that's my background. Okay, go ahead. You can finish the story now.
Well, and it's not even your fault, really. So we found this really cool hike. We did some research, and it was this old fire lookout. And to be honest, it was totally worth it. It was this amazing view. But
I'm so glad.
So spoiler alert, Steven didn't make it.
No.
So we had to drive, and we didn't pick this up from Google Maps, but it was like an hour drive to get to the trailhead. But 20 minutes of that was basically off-road.
Yeah, it was 3 miles, but it was the longest 3 miles ever.
Yeah, because we're in a rental car, and I didn't want to damage it, so I'm going 3 miles per hour. And meanwhile, Steven's desperately and horribly hungover, so he's just greatly suffering in this car ride. I felt so bad. But he's I'm like, should we just go home? He's like, no, let's just try. So we get to the trailhead, and he's like, I'm going to do it. We're going to hike. So we go. So never try to hike at elevation up and it was a pretty good gain. I feel like it was like a 2,000 or 3,000 foot elevation gain on the hike. It was short.
I think the fire lookout was at like 14,000 feet.
Yeah, so we were.
I mean, I don't know where we started, but.
And we were definitely gaining. Like that trail was straight up, basically.
Yeah.
And you just died like a quarter of a mile in, and I felt so bad. I was gonna go, but you told me to press on. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't care.
So we should
sat there and threw up.
So we should. But that hike was really cool, and the fire lookout was amazing. So I think we need to do like revenge of that hike.
Yeah.
And next time we go, maybe we'll go back there, and we'll make sure we'll have to get a car that's like an SUV so we can actually drive. So anyway, Steven was a big trooper, and then he had to endure the 3 miles back on basically off-road.
I don't remember it. I think I slept.
Yeah, I think he passed out at that point. So
yeah.
So anyways,
also side note, I rallied. And we went to the beer festival.
Yeah, you went day 2. You rallied and made it. So.
I did not drink as much that time.
No, we paced ourselves. So that, by the way, we need to record that episode soon, but we'll have to do going to a beer festival tips and tricks because
we learned a lot.
Another thing that was absent that first year that we had the second year was the pretzel necklace, which is critical. Yes. But the reason I bring that up is, so we'll be going to Seattle and hopefully we'll be doing a hike, but
there will be shenanigans.
Hopefully we won't be too hungover.
I think we both, I have to speak for you, but I can definitely handle a little bit more alcohol now, and I also have a little bit more self-awareness.
Yes.
And we won't be at 14,000 feet, hopefully.
Yes, that'll definitely help. So we'll be going on that trip, and then maybe we'll record an episode in Seattle. That'd be kind of fun.
That'd be cool. Or just even when we get back, just record a sort of report back because it's going to be awesome. We're gonna have so many beers to talk about.
Yeah, one way or another, we'll do a check-in on the trip. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
Some good content, hopefully. So, anyways, I don't have anything else to add. Do we have anything to add to this episode of the deep dive into Kolsch?
Yeah, no, just drink more Kolsches.
Yes, I agree. I really like this.
I think this is a cool style.
I agree, and I like its history. I like that it's very punk rock.
Yeah.
It's a rule skirting beer.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, well, cheers, Steven. This has been episode 5. Is this 5? We're on 5?
5. I know.
Nice.
We made it. I know.
Episode 5 of Attenuation, a beer podcast, and we will be back next week. My name is Jason, and I'm joined with my best friend from 8th grade, Steven.
That's me.
Maybe you're supposed to say your name.
Hello.
And we will see you next time. Thank you so much.
All right. See ya. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Attenuation, a beer podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button, and we'll catch you next week. Cheers.